And we are finally back for another episode of Northern Summer Showcase Northern Lights, covering the Canadian Football League. It's been a couple weeks since we've been on, had some life things going on both sides of this show, mainly my side, if I'm being completely honest with you guys. So thank you, everybody who's tuning in tonight. Really appreciate it. And we can get into a ton of different topics tonight. But before we do that, Michael, how you doing tonight, man?
Good, brother. Good. College football season started, so I'm already there. CFL's got an important weekend coming up. It's one of my favorite weekends of the season. Labor Day weekend. It's always a classic showdown for four people, and four games, and then and gearing up for the NFL season coming up. The ELF season is winding down, man. I mean, football. You can't really complain. That's for sure.
Nonstop, it seems like, especially with college football starting up, which, to be completely honest, I don't follow very heavily, as you know. But man, with that being said, there's a ton of CFL news to discuss.
Yes.
It's top to bottom. We could sit here and probably discuss just topics for a good 2 to 3 hours, if we're being honest here. But we're going to try and keep it short and sweet for you guys. And, a couple of topics at hand. I mean, just to run over them real quick. I mean, I want to talk about Austin Mack returning to the Alouettes. Rasheed Bailey is back on a CFL practice roster, but he's still in the CFL. What is going on with Nathan Rourke? Matu Betts is back in BC. Chris Jones back in Hamilton. Chad Kelly's back. Winnipeg found some momentum. And Sask is all of a sudden winless in the last 5 games. So lots to talk about. Any particular subjects you want to start on tonight?
Just go ahead and let's run right down the list. Might as well, right?
Sounds great. So on that note, Alouettes have made a couple moves at wide receiver, bringing in, Austin Mack after he was released by the Atlanta Falcons. And they also extended Tyler Snead, another player on the roster who's only played 1 game so far this season, but has done some good things. So, I mean, real quick, just off the cuff reaction, what are your thoughts on Austin Mack being back with the Alouettes and his immediate impact?
I believe they re-signed him and then they extended him too. I think they extended him as well. So for a multi-year deal. I mean, look, Austin Mack has absolutely 100% been a staple for this Montreal offense in the past. So him coming back and playing for this, playing for Montreal, and then them coming off the championship, it just feels like this is one of those situations where the rich get richer again. He fits in perfectly for what they're doing, and I think it's a great signing. It's the same with Tyler Snead. Snead is another guy that's extended because of his ability to be able to extend second downs into first downs, right? Like, that's one of his staples, that he's been in this offense for, a little bit now. And even though he's played 1 game this year, he's a guy who any quarterback is going to be able to be relied on, in the future. So I think it's great moves by Montreal. They're doing what they can to try to keep the top of their roster together, to help maybe make a push, towards the championship here in the next couple of years, if not this year.
I completely agree. It seems like they're all in on this season. For whatever reason, it seems like there's just a sense of urgency in Montreal to go out and win another Grey Cup this year. And just a quick touch on Tyler Snead's value to the Alouettes. Last season, he was targeted 76 times, had 788 yards and 5 touchdowns. So, I mean, definitely a productive wide receiver. This year's a little out of the norm for him as far as what he's been able to do with Montreal in the past. So hopefully he can get back on this night, I guess, and find some momentum as well. And then Austin Mack. Sorry, go ahead.
On the Snead.
There you go. Didn't even catch that myself. That's funny. But as far as Austin Mack went, I was a little surprised to see, he was targeted so much immediately. But I guess as a wide receiver, catching passes, whether it's CFL rules or NFL rules. But he did see 8 targets in his first game back with the Alouettes. And he only caught 3 passes for 32 yards. But, there's to be expected some little bit of rust there. when you return to an offense that you haven't been in for quite a while at this point. So ultimately, I'm glad that he got the NFL look. I'm glad he's back in the CFL, though. The CFL needs to find a way to keep some of their stars in the league and continuing to build their name value to each market.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is Austin Mack's a name that people recognize, right? Like in Montreal, they recognize the name. Tyler Sneed, they recognize the name. So it leaves the ability to continue to build a brand and have recognizable players in that brand, right? Like, so it's a smart move by both the organization and the players to want to stay with this team and be with this team, just for that purposes alone. Like, what you're getting. Like Mac, like you said, was targeted so much because they understood what Mac's value is. They were like, we're gonna pepper you and see what happens. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. We'll be able to make it work out in the future. So I have no issues that Mac will get acclimated to this offense, get comfortable with Fajardo, and big things could be on the horizon for Montreal with this signing.
I definitely agree. And I mean, I'm super excited to see him back. Like I said, it's always good to be able to bring those big name backs, such as a Nathan Rourke, which we'll talk about here shortly. But the next subject up, which I actually forgot to put on the write-up, is does Trey Ford take back over in Edmonton when he's healthy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, I don't know what else you were going to say there. Sorry to cut you off, but
no, you're good.
It's a yes. I mean, let's face it, this Elks team was winless. I know Chris Jones was a huge problem with that as well, but they were winless prior to Trey Ford coming in, and Trey Ford came in, kind of lit a fire under this team's ass. The team started playing really well, and then he got hurt. So, MBT, for what he is, he's done well enough to be serviceable. It's not. The offenses are night and day. We saw it last week with Edmonton, and we're going to continue seeing the differences with this team. So you have to give it to your more dynamic playmaker, and you have to give it to the guy who helped light a fire under that win streak that happened. So I give it to Edmonton to move forward with Trey Ford at the helm.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough. Like you said, the offenses with these two different playmakers are completely different. You put Ford in there, the defense has to defend him completely different than they look at MBT, and that's always going to be the situation when you have a guy like Trey Ford under center. Playing mostly out of the shotgun, so I say that. But he's just such a dynamic athlete that he opens up different things in the entire offense that you wouldn't normally be able to do with MBT as the starting quarterback. And I just think he's too much of a boom or bust type quarterback in order to not give him that opportunity to continue playing, because you need to figure out what you have in him. Going forward, especially. I mean, if he's not the guy, you need to know it by the end of 2024, because this is already season 3 for him. And I mean, if you're not prepared to hand him the keys in season 4, it's time to start looking for the next guy to take over as the future in Edmonton, which could come quicker than we think with the way they've treated him. But it seems like Jarius Jackson has a little bit more faith in him, but we'll see how things go if he starts to falter down the stretch.
Well, I mean, the other thing that you got to think of too is, even though he's boom or bust, it's also the fact that defenses have to respect his playmaking ability. Yes, teams are going to eventually catch on to that. They're going to find a way to defend it. They're going to find a way to slow it down. And that's up to Trey Ford to then get better, right? Under Chris Jones, I don't think that was possible, because I don't think Chris Jones was investing his time into Trey Ford. Unlike Coach Jackson, on the other hand, he may be investing his time into Trey Ford's development. So it may slow down, but I think he's going to find other ways to utilize it. So
that's fair, and I hope so. I mean, obviously, it's a little bit different situation with Jackson, because I mean, he was in those shoes at one point. He's been a CFL quarterback. He's a mobile guy when he played, so it's a situation where it makes perfect sense for him to be the guy to kind of lead the beginning of Trey Ford's career, which I applaud, Edmonton for bringing him in as offensive coordinator at the time, but it seems like with him having a little bit more power, we found a little bit more success. How's it going, Shane? Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. While you're here, make sure you hit that like button, comment, subscribe. We always appreciate all of that. The next topic at hand, in my personal opinion, should definitely be the fact that Rasheed Bailey's back. So he was released back in late July by Toronto. He's a big name player, been a part of 2 Grey Cup teams, and now he's finally back in the CFL. I'm not quite sure what took so long, but we have that September expansion coming up to the practice squad. So Ottawa took advantage and brought a rather veteran receiver into their practice squad. So what are your immediate thoughts on this one?
Rasheed Bailey is one of my favorite players, even when he played with Winnipeg. However, it feels like the last couple years have been heading in the wrong direction for him. He hasn't been as productive as he had been, for years prior to. I don't know if it's just a lot of the injuries are catching up to him, and his body's kind of not responding the way that they all expected. Maybe he has a lingering problem. I'm not really sure. I love Rasheed Bailey as a player, and I hope that he's 100% healthy. And I think it's a great get for Ottawa if he returns to even 90% of what he's capable of doing. Right? Like he's going to be a reliable guy for Drew Brown if Brown's healthy, and obviously health is a big factor. But Drew Brown is going to be a guy that he's going to end up loving, and he's going to end up being a reliable target. Now, is he going to be a big play guy? I don't think so. I think those days are basically behind him for the most part. So he's going to be shifted to more of like that safety net. You can rely on me. I got good hands. I'll catch the tough catches over the middle type of player.
Chain mover.
Well, yeah, he's a chain mover. I mean, he's that first down guy. He's a possession receiver, basically, at this point in time in his career now, in comparison to where he's been in the past. So I think it's a good move by Ottawa, and I also think what can't go understated here is the locker room presence that he brings.
Agreed. I mean, that winning mentality is something that I think Ottawa has focused heavily on bringing in this season. That's why you go out and get a guy like Drew Brown, who I know he was the backup in Winnipeg, but he's seen a lot of winning. I
was just going to say, let's not give credit to the connection between Bailey and Brown too.
That's a good point.
Their time together in Winnipeg too. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, honestly, that's also a great point. With him being a part of 2 Grey Cup teams, he can kind of help guide the way. And I know there's a lot of guys on this team that have won before. A lot of those Toronto connections as well, due to the fact that we brought in some people from Toronto in the front office, and then also on the team, our Darius Pickett, as we all know, has been quite influential this season so far in changing the mentality and the culture. And he's been all about it all off season. But yeah, ultimately, kind of crazy that it took over a month for Bailey to find a home, but he's back. And my question for Ottawa, or at least the coaching staff, is where do you fit him in? They've basically been carrying, like, I want to say 6 receivers on the roster all year long, on the active roster during game days, for that matter. So, I mean, do you put Nick Mardner on the bench? Do you bench Devontae Dedman? Do you just leave him on the practice squad all year? Like, what's the ultimate plan here? Is he just a guy that's going to come in strictly for an injury replacement? And if that's the case, then it makes a lot of sense. And that's a move that really can put them over the top heading into the playoffs and hopefully a great push in Ottawa.
I don't believe that if you're Ottawa, you make any major adjustments with how you're running your wide receivers. If anything, you're just adding a rotational guy that might play a handful of snaps each game until he's called upon for something more. If he becomes a hot hand, then maybe the game flow works into his favor. But I don't believe if you're Ottawa, you change anything that you're doing at this moment in time, because let's be honest, at this point in time, I think they have a better record than most people may have thought, and this defense is so good that there is a legitimate opportunity and chance for them to maybe possibly be a disruptor into the playoffs that could surprise some people.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think that's the type of moves you make when you're playing with house money, and for once, Ottawa finally gets to play from that perspective. So definitely interested to see how this all works out for him. But there have been a few, wide receiver injuries throughout this season to where he could have, been utilized in those games to kind of weather the storm until the other players came back. And I know we just saw the emergence of Nick Mardner as well last week. So, I mean, I'm really hoping that they don't mess with the lineup too much, even with Bailey coming in. But, it remains to be seen. Next big topic at hand, let's go to Chris Jones. So, obviously, you and I have both been very critical of Chris Jones, as has everybody who's paid attention to the CFL as of late, because how couldn't you be? But with that being said, I mean, he's back in Hamilton as their defensive play caller. I think his technical term is like senior analyst or something like that. What are your thoughts about Chris Jones ultimately hired by Hamilton once again? And what did you think about his debut in Hamilton last week?
Well, I mean, you could see Hamilton was playing better. I mean, the defense was playing much better. I know they lost the game. They gave up 26 to Winnipeg, but the defense, that game otherwise probably wouldn't have been close to it probably wouldn't have been close. Let's just be honest. The score probably would have been a lot higher. Winnipeg probably would have gone on and produced, some offensive fireworks. However, I did notice that there was some players that were not as readily celebratory with Chris Jones on the sideline as some other players were. I don't know if the players themselves are necessarily excited to play for him. A loss is still a loss at the end of the day. Like, you're making the turnovers, you get the sacks, which Hamilton needed both of, and he found a way to get QB pressure on him. It's just I don't know if the players are going to respond for the remainder of the year the way that everybody thinks it's going to happen. We'll see what happens. This also may be a situation with Chris Jones that he's a better coordinator than he is a head coach. You see it in the NFL all the time. And
Yep.
there's legitimate chance that you may be seeing it here as well. So
There's a very good chance. I mean, after this game, you have to kind of ask yourself that question. And I mean, to be fair, I mean, it is technically easier to be a coordinator. You're only focused on one side of the ball. You can kind of hyper focus on, whatever issues you see and kind of make adjustments and move on rather than having to manage multiple different facets of the game. But I mean, in this game alone, 3 interceptions, 3 sacks, pretty solid performance overall by his unit. And I mean, if they can continue that kind of play, Hamilton might be dangerous down the stretch. I mean, it's a wide open. Okay, well, I mean, yeah, temper expectations. Obviously, I mean, it's pretty late in the season at this point, but there's still a wide open playoff race, unless your name is Ottawa or Montreal. I mean, basically, there's still a chance.
yeah,
We'll see how long that chance lasts, though.
oh, there's definitely a chance. I just think Hamilton has other problems. The defense was definitely one of the biggest ones, but I think they have other issues because at the end of the day, a coordinator is only a coordinator. The players still have to go out and make the plays, and the defense still has to respond. And we'll see if they continue playing hard for him down the stretch.
Exactly. And actually, one guy I wanted to point out real quick before I move on from this game, I guess, is Tim White. We've been talking about Tim White and his struggles this season a lot. He was targeted 10 times in this game, 7 receptions for 134 yards, had a end around for 31 yards as well. So, I mean, what were your takes from Tim White finally kind of hopefully finding his feet?
Much better. The three incompletions that were his way on the targets weren't his fault. They were just great plays by the defense. No drops in this one, or at least no accredited drops, I should say. In this one, they did a really wonderful job of getting him involved to show him that they still trust him. Right? Like, it's Tim White. You have to trust him. So, I mean, I think that's part of the reason why they were in this game too late at 26-23 was because they trusted Tim White, and Tim White made some plays when it mattered the most. He just needs help. That's the biggest thing, is that he needs help. So
that's definitely fair. I mean, it'll be interesting to see exactly how they develop some talent around him, but he definitely has been, one of the top targets in Hamilton for a while now. So moving on to another topic, Betts is back in BC. So obviously he signed with Detroit. You can see it there in the graphic for the 2024 preseason and training camp cycle. Did not make the roster or the practice squad and has returned to BC to hopefully help their chances in a playoff push. So what are your thoughts on this one? And then we can kind of talk about Nathan Rourke here in a minute as well.
I mean, it's good. It's good for BC. I mean, anytime you get a veteran guy back, or a guy who's played at a high level, or contributed to your team in some manner, and you get him back, it's fantastic. And he's more experienced now, right? Like, yes, he didn't make the squad down there in the NFL, but he gets that valuable coaching experience. He gets that valuable, playing time down there. I know the rule set's a little bit different, but he gathers all of that to help build his confidence, to make him better with his technique, better with, push pulls, better with rips and swims, gap assignment, whatever it may be. It makes him more seasoned, right? Like, you can never, ever, ever have too much seasoning, at his age and the way he plays the game. So it's good for BC, and I think that it's another piece to the puzzle to help that defense out, because again, let's face it, BC's defense probably has not been as good as we all expected it to be this year. So.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, Terrell Williams, the defensive line coach for Detroit, has been coaching defensive line since the late 90s. So, I mean, if there's a coach that you want to go and play for as a defensive lineman to kind of learn some new techniques or refine some techniques, not a bad candidate, just saying. So definitely could have picked up some tricks, and we'll see, in the next couple of weeks how he does, and if he can jump right back in and be an immediate contributor for BC. If he could, it could go a long way. In their case, they are now 5-5 and trying to resuscitate their playoff hopes as they've slid the past couple games. Luckily for them, there's been some slides, alongside them, in particular Saskatchewan, but we'll get to that in a minute. Obviously, a big news a couple weeks ago. Granted, we didn't have an episode that week. Was Nathan Rourke was re-signed by the BC Lions. He was also released by the Atlanta Falcons, and then I believe he spent a brief time with another NFL team earlier in the season. And ultimately, a lot of people said he didn't get a fair shot. I would sit there and argue that he did have a fair chance in the NFL before deciding to return. But ultimately, so far in the past couple games that he's played, he hasn't looked like the Nathan Rourke we would have expected. Do you accredit that to just rust, or, was there something else going on the past, in 2022 when he did have that MVP or MOP level season?
No, I mean, I think that you're seeing the reasons why he was, let go at the NFL level, right? Like, no offense to Nathan Rourke, because I think Nathan Rourke is a fantastic, quarterback for the CFL. It's just that there is a huge talent, discrepancy between the quarterbacks at the CFL level and the quarterbacks at the NFL level. Maybe not across the whole league, because I'm sure there's some people that you can make a case that you say the upper echelon quarterbacks in the CFL may belong in the bottom half of the NFL. However, as we've seen in the past, when there is a politic version involved, an outside quarterback from another league is not going to necessarily come in and immediately be handed everything, right? You're going to have to earn it. And if you don't grab the bull by the horns, then you're going to be on the outside looking in. And the realistic nature of the quarterback position, especially at the NFL level, is 64 guys are going to make the team, and make all 32 on all 32 teams. That's about it. And then there's going to be some teams that are going to have practice squad guys, right? But generally speaking, most of the guys that are there are either that make that top 64, we'll say top 70, at the quarterback position alone are guys that have been drafted by teams, so they have actual NFL draft capital, or they're quarterbacks that have been in the NFL for an extended period of time, so they have a veteran experience, right? That's generally the quarterbacks that are ranged in that window. So as far as him not getting a fair shake, I think he got a fair shake. It's hard getting the reps when you're coming in as the QB 3 or 4 for a team. So he just may not have seized the opportunity, or they just saw enough from the QB 1 and 2, and they were just like, the rest of the reps don't really matter as much. So then on the flip side of that, I think it was foolhardy for a lot of us CFL fans to think that he was just going to come in and immediately jump into the 2022 form. He got some valuable experience in the NFL, but again, it's a different game. And it's also very possible that it's just enough of a system change for him that it's going to take a little bit for him to work into it. I think this week is going to be much better than the last 2 weeks. But again, at the same time, like, it's possible the game has just passed him by, even though he was a stud in 2022 and he's not very old. We won't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a thing where, fans tend to overreact. And obviously, right now we're kind of leaning towards that overreaction and saying that he's struggling or whatever. It's only been 2 games.
Yeah, for sure.
0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I don't think that's what anybody in BC was hoping when they brought him back. But the big question I have for BC is obviously the long-term ramifications of signing him. You signed him to a 3-year deal to finish out this season and the 2 seasons following. He's immediately the highest paid player in the CFL once again. So that kind of, lends credence to the fact that they're probably going to keep him as the starter going forward. And if that's the case, then how do they proceed with Vernon Adams? I mean, if it were you and you're the GM of BC, what would you do with Vernon Adams?
So, see, this is an interesting thing because Vernon Adams has been a team-first guy, right? Like, he knew Nathan when Nathan came in. He's still on the sideline cheering, and he's still on the sideline being there. And when you're a GM or a front office and you see that, it's like hard to want to move on from a team-first guy, right? Like, that's just the way that it is. You don't want to move on from the guy who just lost his starting job due to injury, and you signed another quarterback to be the highest paid player, knowing that the future is probably going to be through him. And this guy's still on the sideline, showing up, being excited for his teammates, et cetera, et cetera. However, their best bet is what they should have done, their best bet is to trade the rights of Vernon Adams to a team. And or trade him to a team, however you want to call it, whatever you want to say it. And done that sooner rather than later, and just let him know, like, hey, it's not you, I promise. It's business, and I want to give you an opportunity and chance to go play somewhere. I get that may come back and bite you in the ass, but as an organization, and for everything that he has done for that organization and how he handled this situation for that organization, I think it would have been the classier move for BC to do that. Now, I'm not saying that BC is being selfish, and I'm not saying that BC is, not being classy or being classless by any means. What I'm saying is it's easy to be like, well, we don't want to let you go because we love you, right? We want you here. We want you to be with this roster, this team, these players around you love you, support you. They know that you're a leader. Like, we want all of that. Yeah, we do. However, you're kind of hurting his career, in the sense that he's not going to be on the field, right? Like, Vernon Adams, we know what he is, but at the same time, like, he still wants to play. And as long as Rourke is healthy, you're not starting Adams.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least that's what it looks like on the surface. And I mean, obviously, Adams is a little bit older. He's 31 years old. He's got a couple injuries in his background, so that's a concern as well. But at the same time, he was on pace to not set records, but be very, very close to passing records this season earlier. So, I mean, with that in mind, I mean, if you're a team like Hamilton or, dare I say Calgary, I know Jake Mayer is pretty solid, but he's had his moments where you're frustrating, beating a head against the wall. I mean, if you're looking at your playoff hopes right now, and you can bring in again a guy like Vernon Adams that can be there for the next couple seasons. I mean, what's that worth? I mean, is that worth multiple playmakers, that are veteran CFL guys right now, several draft picks? I mean, this could potentially be one of the most valuable trade chips I've ever seen in the CFL in my time of covering it. I can't think of any really large trades that would rival something like Vernon Adams being shipped to a new team.
Yeah, and the other thing is too is like when you really focus in on what Vernon Adams brings and what he might net for a return. 31's not super old for a quarterback nowadays. However, it is on the older side because you're on the 30, you're on the plus side of 30, so you're not considered that young chicken or the spring chicken or whatever the hell that saying is, and you're not considered the young guy anymore. However, the CFL has a longer developmental side of things for quarterbacks, right? Like their younger guys generally take a little bit longer to develop because of whatever it may be. We discussed it may be a talent issue. We discussed it may be a lack of top tier talent coming in or whatever it may be. So they're kind of forced to hold on to these guys a little bit longer. And Vernon provides a great mentorship for somebody who is doing that, right? Like one of these teams sign a young quarterback, you bring in Vernon Adams for a few years, let him mentor it, and then you move on, similar to what we saw with Calgary and Bo Levi Mitchell. Now, Bo Levi had been there forever. Now it's Jake Mayer's turn, right? I don't see a team I don't see a situation unless Mayer gets hurt for Calgary to bring him in now because Mayer's already had that opportunity. However, a team like Ottawa as a backup possibly if Brown gets hurt, or another team that has a younger QB room. Ottawa's is a little bit older because Masoli's still there, so I guess it's not really Ottawa, but a team that has like a younger quarterback. I was thinking of Dustin Crum when I was saying that, but a team that has a younger quarterback kind of like sitting at the backup position right now, and they're not really sure they're in flux at what to do with the quarterback spot. It might be a good spot for Vernon Adams, but it's hard because there's only 9 teams in the league, right? And you have a plan in the future. Like Kolaros is going to be fine in Winnipeg. Chad Kelly's going to be fine in Toronto. Fajardo is going to be fine in Montreal. Maybe Trevor Harris, but what's the point? Trevor Harris is 37 or 36, 37, and then you trade for a 31-year-old like Saskatchewan, maybe with Trevor Harris. Hamilton, Bo Levi Mitchell, same situation. Like you're not going to really. I mean, he's older, so maybe, but are you really getting yourself better per se? So it's an influx. It's a weird situation because there's not as many opportunities because there's only 9 teams. So,
can you trade him to the UFL?
I mean, I think that he has UFL talent. It's just he hasn't had as much. He hasn't had as much opportunities to play ball down here for American style, to the U.S. style of play. That I think at 31, even with his talent, it may be too much of a learning curve for him.
I could see that. He's been in the CFL for a long time now.
Right. Like with MBT when he came down, but he had a ton of American style and American rule set version of football, right? And I know a quarterback's a quarterback, but it is different. So he hasn't really had that. So maybe, if he could find a Canadian coach to come down, maybe it might be a little bit easier, but
you never know. I guess we'll see who ends up the Showboats coach. It might be Chris Jones at this rate. No, but obviously totally joking that they can't trade him to the UFL. But yeah, definitely it would be interesting to see him traded to another CFL team for sure. Although, like you said, there aren't many options at this point. Realistically, I'd have to really sit there and break it down, but I don't see it happening this year.
Like, if this had happened last year, it would have made sense for maybe Edmonton, because of Trey Ford. But now that MBT has already been there, and now that Trey Ford is another year, and he's proven that he can do it while he's healthy, it doesn't really make much sense for Edmonton, right? Like, if you look at the direction of each one of these 9 teams, it's very hard to pinpoint a team and just be like, that's the team, without going, okay, but what about so-and-so? It's just the nature of it. And the only reason why I had mentioned Ottawa, like I said, is because they do have a young guy in Dustin Crum, but they just signed Drew Brown, so there's really doesn't make any sense because Brown's not very old either. So
yeah, completely agree on that. I mean, obviously Brown is the answer for the future going forward. He's had an unbelievable run so far this season.
Correct.
And hopefully he continues that for the rest of the season and into the future, because Ottawa needs some positivity after so many years of losing. But speaking of losing, we're going to transition over to Saskatchewan, which all of a sudden they have not won in the last 5 weeks or 6 weeks, I believe, because there was a bye week in there, but 5 games they've played. They've lost or tied, including one tie with the Redblacks a couple weeks ago. What do you think the issue is for Saskatchewan? We thought. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I thought I didn't realize you were finishing or had more to say there. No, it's just more or less the fact that with Saskatchewan, this is the team that we expected, right? This is the team that we were expecting to get, and they started off hot and they were playing really good ball, and people believed in it. Yeah, Trevor Harris getting hurt really hurt this team. Like, I know Shea Patterson played all right, but I think Harris just came back. Was it last week? Was it last week or is it this week? I know he just came back.
Check. I want to say 2 weeks ago.
Was it 2 weeks ago?
I believe so. Let me check real quick. But go ahead, finish your thoughts.
Yeah, but Harris just coming back, so he's just getting into the flow of things again. This offensive line has been ravaged by injury. It's one of the biggest issues is that the injuries on the offensive line have been pretty substantial for them, or at least it was. It didn't look very good this past week. I just think it's more or less them. I think the confidence being shot a little bit when Harris went down and Patterson, started not playing as well. They just need to find themselves again. I think that they can get another tough win. They can go on a streak. It kind of reminds me of the New Orleans Breakers from the USFL the last year that they were there, right? Like, win 4 in a row, lose 3 in a row, win 4 in a row, or some whatever it was, or it was like 3, 4, and 3 or something, or 3, 4, and 3. It kind of reminds me of that a little bit. I think the same thing could possibly happen here for Saskatchewan down the stretch, and they don't need to get hot right now, but they need to get hot at the right time, and it's probably on the horizon.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, obviously. Hold on, just.
I've got a little guest spot here, some video.
Apparently, Netflix was like, "Hey, you've been sitting on pause way too long." So, talking about Saskatchewan, you look back at some of these losses they've had. I mean, they just lost to Toronto by 1 point. Montreal, they lost by 3 points. Tied with Ottawa. Lost by 9 to Edmonton when Edmonton put up 42 points, or 11, and then they lost by 4 to Montreal. So, I mean, realistically, 3 of those 4 games lost by 4 points or less. I mean, realistically, it's going to take a couple adjustments on the right week, and they're going to find success again, I'm sure. But this has to do a little bit of damage to Corey Mace's Coach of the Year candidacy, I would think, especially with the way Montreal's been playing.
Well, I mean, I think that it was going to be a long shot for Mace anyways. It's just a matter. I mean, if Saskatchewan can get hot again though, and get down the stretch and end up being like a 3 seed, I mean, you still would have to consider him because nobody predicted Saskatchewan to be in this situation. Like nobody. I can't think of anybody that I spoke to or watched with CFL that knows anything about the CFL that puts Saskatchewan in a spot where they may be contending for a championship. I mean, for a title, a conference title, let alone a potential playoff run, right? Like I saw them in the bottom 3 um, almost everywhere. So any successful season for them is fine. Like any season that involves them being in the playoff hunt is a success, I think, for most people in the situation.
That's definitely fair. Now, on that Coach of the Year front, I mean, does it go to Jason Moss in Montreal? I mean, does Ottawa sneak in there and get Bobby Dyson award? I mean, who's your favorite for it at this point? Now that the Saskatchewan's kind of slipped.
Coach Shea, right now.
Okay.
Primarily because Winnipeg is back in it. Beginning of the year, they looked terrible. Beginning of the year, they looked like that they were going to be a 2-win team, right? Like it looked miserable. What are they, 6-4 now? So I mean, or right around there.
Yeah.
6-4.
Sorry, 5-6.
5-6. I mean, but they're right in the middle of that conference, right? Because that conference is kind of meh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, they're right back into the run of things. So at this point in time, he would be my front runner, only because if he was able to turn it around. However, I think just based upon the way that they run, how they do things, Ottawa, because you guys are the 2 seed right now, and Montreal would probably be the two head spots there for the head coach of the year, just because those are the 2 teams that are really kind of setting the standard right now, right?
Yeah, that's fair. It's kind of ironic that you mentioned Mike O'Shea, because realistically, if you think about it, this year shows his value maybe more so than most have, because Zach Collaros has been such a clutch player for so many years, but now you look at it and he hasn't really played as well this year. So it's like Mike O'Shea having to make on the fly adjustments and make it work. And then, to your credit, we were going to discuss this topic anyway, but they've won 5 out of the last 7 games.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're finding some momentum when it matters the most. Anytime you can start winning in the middle of the season and hopefully carry that momentum into the playoffs, that's sometimes better than being hot in the beginning and starting to lose games at the end of the year. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how they can finish out this year. But then for the final topic at hand, and this is always the most controversial as of late, Chad Kelly returns. And then, as a caveat, they also released Brian Scott at the same time. Obviously, a quarterback had to go for Chad Kelly to return. Unfortunately, that odd man out is Brian Scott. So, what are your thoughts on Chad Kelly returning to Toronto and his immediate performance against Saskatchewan, who we were just talking about?
I mean, we have a tendency as people and fans of athletes or entertainment people, actors, actresses, whatever it may be, anybody that's in the spotlight, we have a tendency to expect them to be the perfect person all the time, like the perfect role model, the perfect person, the perfect this, the perfect that. At the end of the day, they're human beings, right? Not condoning what Chad Kelly did by any means. Not saying that Chad Kelly didn't deserve the suspension. What I am saying is that Chad Kelly has served his suspension. Are we going to sit here and continue and expect Chad Kelly to be punished for the rest of his life for this? Like, if you're not a fan of him, you're not a fan of him. Cool, whatever, don't care. But he came back from his suspension. He served his time, as the saying goes, based upon what the league gave him for what happened. He's apologized for it. He's apologized for it again. And the only thing that we could do is just hope he does better, right? Like we have to be able to give him that opportunity and chance to be a better person. As far as his on-field play is concerned, Toronto needed this at this time. The team was, no offense to Cameron Dukes, I think he held the fort down long enough for what it was. But this is a team that could be potentially dangerous in a potential CFL championship team. And Chad Kelly is the perfect example of what you want a CFL quarterback to be. It's just the way that he is. It's just who he is as a talent, and it's perfect for him. This league is set for a guy like him. So, yeah, there's no controversy for me. It sucks that he went through it. It sucks for the victim of the situation even more. But he had his punishment. He did it regardless of. It's not my place to judge whether that punishment was lighter, too light or too harsh. It's just he did what he was asked of him to do, and he's back, and now potentially could lead Toronto to a championship game.
Agreed. Let me ask you this: if it wasn't Chad Kelly, and say it was, let's throw out Taylor Powell, a guy who hasn't, led a team to a 15-1 record and, the birth of a Grey Cup, would they be treating him the same way in terms of suspensions and whatnot? In your opinion? Obviously, this is all conjecture at this point.
Probably not, just because of the way that you take a look at the way that certain teams do certain things, and you take a look at the way the leagues do. Each league certainly does. They handle situations differently than other situations, right? Like, however, for the most part, I feel like the CFL probably would have still suspended Powell. I just don't know if it would have been 9 games. It may have been a little bit more. It may have been 9 games or 8 games or whatever it was. But Taylor Powell probably would have been released by the team that he was on. Like, that wouldn't have been a league thing. That would have been a team thing. Toronto chose to stick by their guy. Granted, Toronto knows what they have with Chad Kelly. They've seen what Chad Kelly has. It's been successful with Chad Kelly. So there was really no reason for them to move on. They can sit there and support him and get him the help that he needs and make sure that it doesn't happen again. Whereas a guy like Taylor Powell is replaceable at this level. So
that's kind of the exact point I was getting at. And that's definitely something that I feel there's a whole lot of layers there. Obviously, Chad Kelly, prior to Nathan Rourke being signed, was the highest paid CFL player. There's obviously some financial obligations there that, I'm not going to sit here and try and break all those down. To be completely honest, I'm not exactly privy to all the details of his contract. So that's one situation where we're not going to sit here and break down the cap ramifications. But at the same time, having $1.8 million wrapped up in any CFL player, over the next couple of years, you're probably going to try and make that work as an ownership group. So, unfortunately, it's not a pretty look for the CFL to have a guy that's coming straight back from something like that. It's even less pretty for that guy to have had some other altercations throughout his career in college and in the NFL, with run-ins and with the law. But like you said, in this particular situation, if we're strictly judging him off of his body of work in the CFL and what he's done in the CFL, this one incident should not necessarily define his legend in the CFL or his legacy in the CFL. Obviously, like you said, he went to counseling for the issues that he brought on to somebody else. He settled with that victim out of court for an undisclosed amount. So there's multiple different facets to how he's gone about trying to make reparations for his actions. Did it look good that he came out and denied it? Absolutely not. But at the same time, that's pretty much the base for any person who's in a legal battle they typically are going to deny until they lose and then are forced to, admit their faults. So, I don't necessarily fault him for that, but I do fault his kind of cavalier nature to it, to some of the stuff that he had said and done. Hopefully it's a learning experience for Chad Kelly. Hopefully nothing like this ever happens in his career again. I would love to see him get the chance to play out his career and end up being one of the greatest CFL quarterbacks ever. But in order for that to happen, he has to stay away from doing anything like this ever again in his career. If he does it again and the CFL does not throw the book at him, then we can have some real discussions about how bad the CFL is and how they need to reform.
Well, I think that's ultimately what it boils down to, right? Like, we could sit here and not like the guy and not care about him on a personal level and not care if he succeeds, whatever, who cares, right? Like, we don't like him. He doesn't deserve to succeed. However, chances are he's most likely going to succeed because of his talent, right? But do we sit there and punish a guy? Do we sit there and continue to punish a guy if 5 years from now nothing happened again, right? Do we still drag him through the mud for it? Do we still judge him based off what happened? You know what I mean? Like, it's not a situation where it's up to us to decide that he should lose his career and everything about him based off this one action, right? Like, he apologized. Sure, it wasn't a pretty look. Sure, it's not a pretty look for the league. But I don't know, man. Like, it's just, like, I'm not rooting for the guy to be successful because I don't like Chad. I never have. But as like a person, like, because he's done some stupid shit in his life. But if he fails now, he doesn't have anybody to blame but himself at the end of the day, right? He's got another chance. And if he blows this one, then that's on him.
If he blows this one, then we can cover him in the ELF.
Well, most likely, or the German Football League.
Yeah, something like that. Some league that will give him a ton of money because of his name. But on that, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll come back with our predictions and betting odds, and then we'll wrap this bad boy up because it's almost midnight on the East Coast. So with that, here's a word from our very awesome sponsors. Check out their YouTube channel as well.
Winter is coming.
And he can make something magical happen here. And there goes the ball. It's going. It's going. You're a fan.
Battles will be won.
Hold on now.
At the 30, and he
Who's going to take victory?
He's and that's what championship points matter.
It's time for war.
This is Current. It's the card my parents used to pay me for mowing the lawn, running errands, and doing well in school. This is the card I used when we got the idea to make our own clothes. And we spread the word, drove downtown, and sold everything we made. This is the card I use to do the things that really matter. This is Current. Visit current.com and download the app for free today.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me. It's so easy. Get out your own way. It's just so easy.
All right, shout out to all those sponsors that make this possible, and hopefully we'll make it even more possible in the near future. But with that, moving on, we will go ahead and get to the betting odds and predictions section. We know you guys love it, so it's back again. Let me pull up those odds real quick for everybody to see. And this is, of course, another sponsor. Got a lot of them. And this is BetUS. So if you would like to place some bets on the CFL, check out BetUS, and then also use our code for an, I believe, 125% match bonus on your first 3 deposits. So nothing better than free money, and that's a good way to get it. But looking at the odds here, we've got Ottawa versus BC. BC is a 2-point favorite at home versus Ottawa. Kind of interesting odds given the way everything's going right now. But what is your prediction on this game?
Well, I mean, basically, we talked about it already, right? Like, Ottawa has one of the best defenses in the league. BC has Nathan Rourke. Rourke is coming off 2, not so hot games. I don't suspect him to have 3 bad games. It will, just because he doesn't have a bad game doesn't mean that's necessarily going to lead to a BC victory. At -2, you know what? At -2, I'd probably take the Lions in this game. And if you're an over/under better, probably go with the over as well.
You're taking the Lions?
I'm gonna take the Lions -2 in this one.
All right, interesting.
I just don't think Rourke is gonna have 3 straight bad games. It's gonna be a close one though, but I think it's gonna be, something like 34-30.
All right. Michael says take BC, -2 at home, 34-30 over Ottawa. I am going the other direction with that. Shocker. I know I'm a homer. So I'm going with the Redblacks again. I'm going to keep picking them until they start losing again and make me look like a fool. So with that in mind, I'm going Ottawa. I'm going to say 27-17. That's a little simple for a score. There's probably going to be some wacky things that happen in this game that screw up my score. But, yeah, I definitely think they cover the spread in this one. So as far as the over, I would bet the under in this one. But we'll see. I mean, this could turn into a shootout pretty quickly if Drew Brown's on his game this week.
If Ottawa was at home, I'd take Ottawa.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, that's essentially what that 2-point spread is, right?
Yeah, basically it's BC just because they got the home. So I mean, but Ottawa at home is undefeated. So like, you can't bet against Ottawa at home. It's just their road record isn't the best. So that's the reason why I took BC.
That's fair. That's fair. I didn't even think about it that way, but that's a good point. Moving on to the Sunday game, we've got Winnipeg at Saskatchewan, which is, again, a 2-point favorite at home. Interesting in this one as well, because obviously they're on a 5-game slide, while Winnipeg is basically going the exact opposite direction and winning 5 of their last 7. So with that in mind, who do you have in this game, and do you think the point spread makes sense in this one?
Well, again, this is one of those situations where you're talking about a 5-16 versus what, a 5-16 or 5-17 or whatever. This one's hard. This is probably going to be the hardest game to pick this week because, yeah, Saskatchewan is on a 5-game slide, but they are, like you said, I think, what is it? Over the course of those 5 games, it's been like 13 points total.
In 3 of the 5, yeah.
3 of the 5.
They lost by 11.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm gonna take Winnipeg in the under on this one, just because of the +2. If it was the money line game, yeah, I guess you could probably say Winnipeg money line as well. So I'm gonna say Winnipeg wins, even with the +2, but it's gonna be a close one. It's gonna be another close one. I'm gonna say 30-26. No, sorry, because I'm taking the under in this one. 26-20. Just under the under.
Sounds good. Bet the under and take Winnipeg to cover the spread.
Yep. Well, I mean, Saskatchewan would have to cover the spread, but I'm taking Winnipeg +2 all day, though. So, like, that's a money line bet. Bet the 105.
That's fair. I'm also going to take Winnipeg in this one. I just don't. Something about Winnipeg, man. Once they find a momentum, there is no slowing them down. So I think they find another victory in this one and make it 6 out of the last 8 and continue on their upward trajectory. Man, as far as a score, I think this is going to be a low-scoring game as well. I mean, the last couple games with them have been in that 20-point range. So, man, your score is probably pretty spot on, honestly. I'm going to go 25-17 in this game, and I think it's going to come down to a turnover at some point, and Trevor Harris is going to throw an untimely interception. That's probably going to end up being the game on their part. So yeah, also in this one, bet the under. So definitely interested to see how this game turns out. That is a tough game to ultimately pick, because at some point Saskatchewan is going to turn it around. It's only a matter of time.
Yep.
But moving on to the next game with a little bit more appropriate spread, in my opinion, you've got Toronto, which is 5-point favorites, even though they are on the road versus Hamilton. Hamilton's obviously had a lot of struggles this season. Toronto is going the opposite direction, just got their quarterback back, has found a lot of success despite the fact that they've started 2 different backups. What are your thoughts on this game?
I'm taking Toronto -5. I think they're going to cover the spread. I'm taking the over as well. I think this game's going to be like 33-22, Toronto. And I think they're going to be in control for most of the game. Hamilton just has too many other issues. I am very intrigued to see what Chris Jones' defense looks like in this game in particular. But I think Toronto is going to come out because they're going to want to prove something. And unfortunately for Hamilton, they're in their way this week. So
I have a feeling this is going to be a blowout game. Chad Kelly, second game back, got his feet back underneath him last week. I think he's going to knock off some of the rust this week. I'm going to go 27-9. Let's go 9. Hamilton puts up 3 field goals. Definitely firmly in the under for me, over for Michael. So definitely, I guess, probably keep an eye on our records. I think Michael's been better at picking scores all season long, across every league for that matter. So you might want to keep an eye on his score. I think I've got a pretty solid record picking games, though. So definitely keep an eye on Toronto winning that one either way.
Yeah.
Final game of the week is Edmonton versus Calgary. I'm actually kind of surprised that Calgary is the favorite here, especially given Edmonton's recent run of success. But they are at home, so that makes sense to a certain extent. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, Calgary only has 1 loss at home, so it makes perfect sense for a 2.5 spread here. However, this is going to be most likely an under, and this is going to probably be one of the tougher games of the week. I'm taking Calgary to beat Edmonton. Probably a score of like 21-19.
Okay.
I don't expect it to be very high scoring. I know Edmonton has a very powerful offense, but this game screams ugly, and I think Calgary wins an ugly one.
That's fair. That's definitely fair, and I think Calgary's probably the team better equipped to win an ugly game for sure. I need to back up a little bit because apparently I contradicted myself. I actually picked Saskatchewan in my CFL News Hub picks, but that's all right. We'll just go ahead and roll with it, I guess. So in this game, I'm actually picking Edmonton. I think Edmonton's on a roll right now. They got something working, and I think they're going to continue making, continue building momentum towards a playoff run. And I know that's crazy to say about Edmonton in particular after the past couple seasons they've had, but realistically, that division is wide open right now. They're 3-8. They're only technically like 2 games out of first place because Saskatchewan's 5-1. So things could change really quickly if they continue to find momentum and Saskatchewan continues to slide. They just need Winnipeg to find some bumps in the road. And obviously, had I stuck with my other predictions from CFL News Hub, they're probably going to see some bumps in the road of going down over the next couple of weeks. So definitely interested to see how this week comes to fruition, because this is definitely going to be an interesting one, and it's very crucial to playoff seeding going forward. Like I just said, as far as the East, it's wide open. In fact, I'll pull up the standings real quick for our final notes here. But anyway, let's go ahead and get your final thoughts for the evening, sir.
Yeah, I just think overall it's nice to see Nathan Rourke back in. We're looking at a 6-team playoff in a 9-team league. So there's 3 teams that are going to be on the outside looking in as far as, certain things are concerned. Like here, you're looking at the West Division. The West Division is not the best overall, but it makes it wide open, at least for a potential run down the stretch here, right? Like that's the key point. So I'm hoping it's a great week of football, a great weekend of football, and fingers crossed for Saskatchewan to be able to turn it around, and hopefully my Calgary prediction comes true.
We shall see. We shall see. As always, make sure you guys hit the like button, comment, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching this. Really appreciate all the support. It's kind of encouraging when you've been doing this for so long that you kind of see those numbers start to grow on a weekly basis of the live viewers, people popping in and commenting and all that. So really appreciate everybody who comes in and comments and gives us all your thoughts. So definitely next episode, we got a couple more this season. Come in, give us your predictions. Let's see it. I'll track yours right along with ours, and we can kind of see who did better over the season or the remainder of the season as we get through these last crucial playoff weeks. But ultimately, super excited for, the end of the CFL season, the beginning of an NFL season. We've got so much more to come. And with all that in mind, definitely, keep an eye on Shady Sports Network. We've got a lot coming at you. In fact, we got Michael Washington's shows on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. We've got Monarchs of Wrestling on Monday. We've also got Eagles Elite on Wednesday. Man, I could go on and on. There's literally tons of content coming out of this channel. So definitely subscribe on YouTube. Make sure to catch all the content. And with that, we'll go ahead and catch you guys in the next episode. Have a great night. And again, thank you for all the support.